Day through Sunday, so please come. We have a very big selection this time, which is really exciting. So 16th through the 19th. Um, but without further ado, I will introduce our presenter. This is PJ up in the corner over here. He's going to talk to you about his book, Raising Kids to Be Brave, Smart, and Kind. So I'm just going to go ahead and hand it on over. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mercedes. Appreciate it. And welcome. And thanks for joining. I know that as Sarah said in the chat, she's like, we put our kids to bed early just to make it to this. And yeah, there's you may have some insanity going on behind you on your cameras, and it's perfectly fine if you don't take them put the cameras on. So my name is PJ Brady. I am American and I live in Belgium. So I am 6 hours ahead of you guys right now, which makes it 1 a.m. my time. And at the same time, I do a lot of work, yes, here in Belgium and yes, in the US. So have late night calls. This one might be a record. And glad to be here and happy to talk about the book with you guys. So thanks for making it. Um, so I'm not, I never intended on being an author at all. Actually, it wasn't a goal of mine to write a book. It was that I I always wanted to make sure I was being a great father, and I'll get into some of those experiences later. But it was what this started out as was a journal for my eldest daughter Alexandra when she was born. I just started writing things down, just observations, the type of parent I wanted to be, things that she was doing, and then as that kept going and I just was writing more and more, then I started writing some articles on parenting, on my parenting experience. And then I started writing a lot of sticky notes. And then I started writing, uh, short stories, all of this. And it eventually just turned into a book, but it was completely accidental in the way that it happened. So by nature, I'm actually a leadership coach. I'm not a parenting expert. If anyone was getting on to hear from a parenting expert, in that, let me define that a little bit. I've got a lot of experience because if you can see in the chat, I've got my daughter Alexandra, who's 13, Emily, who's 11 now, and Josephine, who's 7. Many years of experience. But my background is in leadership training. So I used to actually travel the world, and I was responsible for a group of business leaders in Europe, Middle East, Pakistan, and Africa. So, being based in Belgium, I would travel around all those areas and we would talk about values all the time. We would be talking about values and how values help shape their business, how values help shape their family. And obviously, what I learned, not rocket science, was that strong leaders have strong values. And in that, when I was talking to these leaders, they were in their 40s and 50s, and the first time that they were ever having a conversation about what their values were was at that time. But here's what we found from these leaders is that all of their values, once we dug deep, were shaped at a very young age. All of those values came from their parents, from teachers, from coaches, from their cultures, from their communities. Every single one of them, when I would say, well, where does that value come from? They would think of this time when they were young and say, that's how that value got shaped. That's when I learned that lesson. And so our values are shaped at a very young age, and then they start to get hard as we get older. And I thought, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? Because if we know that strong leaders have strong values and that they're shaped at a very young age, why aren't we talking to our kids more about values? If we know that they're shaped at a young age, could we do that with a little bit more intention? And so in that, I said, all right, well, this is fantastic. At the time, I had 2 kids when I was going through this realization. Alexandra at the time was 4 and Emily was 2. And I said, if I know this, well, then I can help them along. And you know what might help? I'm gonna share my screen now. And let me know if you see this. Are we all on the same page here? Okay. So make sure I'm checking chat at the same time. Great. Thank you for checking in, Sarah and Maureen. So these are my girls. This is Alexandra, and Alex has always been my feeler. Like she's always got these very strong emotions, always wanting to help people out, even when her sisters don't want help. This is Emmeline. She can be my mischievous one. Uh, she's so smart and such like quick as a whip with a joke or with a one liner. She figures things out quick. And then this is my Josephine. And Josephine, if anybody in here has siblings, like that youngest sibling, they get things a little bit quicker because they've got their other siblings to teach them. And she doesn't put up with anyone's crap either. Like she's the one who's always in the mix of the trouble. And when I was doing this presentation last year sometime, the girls were like, Dad, you need new pictures because now they're 11, 13, and 7. I said, okay, so you guys tell me what picture you want to take. So Alex puts on her best clothes, and she's like, okay, this is what I want you to present. I said, okay, that's great. Shows her personality a little bit. This is Emily. This is what she decided to wear to the photo shoot: my Dolphins jersey and 3 pairs of sunglasses. And this is what Josephine decided to wear. She went through all of her dresses, all the princess dresses that we had, all the costumes and things. And this is where we ended. Yep, that's my Josephine. And I was like, okay, fantastic. And I thought, you know what? If I know that all these leaders have these values, well, what do I want to do with these girls? What are the values that I want to teach these young ones? And I thought to myself, all right, well, I was raised mostly by my mom and my sister. My parents were divorced. My stepdad came in at a later age. And in this, so I've kind of been surrounded by women. And I thought, you know what? It breaks my heart every time that a woman doesn't feel like she's beautiful. And I know it's such a bigger topic, isn't it? It's like how we feel and the image of beauty. And I said, you know what? I don't want my daughters to understand the word beautiful as like an Instagram post or what people are showing on social media or on TV. I want them to know that beauty is something that we feel inside. And that doesn't just go for girls, by the way. That's also a male thing too, is I want to make sure that my girls feel beautiful. And I'm in a very interesting situation here in Belgium is that um, there's 2 national languages, French and Dutch. Well, my wife speaks French with my daughters. They learn Dutch in school, and I'm the one who's speaking English to them. So I said, here's a fantastic opportunity that I can actually redefine words for them. So I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to redefine the word beautiful for my girls. And I want it to mean 3 things, but I didn't know what exactly. So I said, okay, it didn't take me long. I thought to myself, what am I sick of in the world? What really makes me mad? And the first thing is people using fear to control other people. It's a huge pet peeve of mine, and it's everywhere. I mean, we see it in the media, we see it in sales, we see it in parenting, right? We make our kids afraid sometimes to get them to do what we need them to do. I want my daughters to understand what fear is, but I don't want it to control them. So I want them to be quote unquote brave. The second thing I thought of is I'm tired of everybody sitting in front of their screens, absorbing information without questioning it. I want my daughters to think. I want them to be critical thinkers. I want them to be curious. I want them to be creative. I want them to learn and grow and seek out new information. I want them to be quote unquote smart. And then the last one that I'm sick of seeing in the world is just the lack of kindness, which is a bit unfair because, quite frankly, if you look for kindness, you see it everywhere. And at the same time, I don't think that there's a single issue that's going on between anyone in any place that can't be solved with a little bit more kindness. I said, okay, it's those 3 things: to be brave, it's to be smart, and it's to be kind. And I said, that, my daughters, is what the word beautiful means. And then we started talking about it a lot more often. And from these values, what I wanted to do is to help them to be able to make decisions. And so I love this quote from Alice in Wonderland. And she comes to this fork in the road and she sees that Cheshire cat sitting in the tree. And she's like, well, can you tell me which road to take? He said, sure, just tell me where you want to go. And Alice says, but I don't know where I want to go. And then the cat says, well, choose either path. Both of them will get you there. And that really resonated with me. And I was like, yes, that's what values are. You know, if we were at a fork in the road, I want my daughters to say, okay, well, what's the brave choice? What's the smart choice? And what's the kind choice? And how is that going to help me get to this destination? But the first thing I had to do is say, all right, we've got all of these different types of values. For us, it's going to be brave, smart, and kind. So the first thing that you do anytime you have a value is you have to be able to define it. If you can't define it, then it doesn't really matter, because what brave and smart and kind means to me can be completely different than what brave, smart, and kind means to you. So from my side of things, I said, all right, for my 4-year-old and 2-year-old, I need to make this really basic. So brave is just to say it's okay to be afraid. That was it. It's okay to be afraid. You need to do it, whatever that was. Anyway, um, to be smart is to think about something before you do it, and to be kind is to you have to be nice to people. So at a 4 and a 2-year-old level, that was the extent of that defining phase. And in that, it was quick and it was easy. And as they've gotten older, it's gotten much more well, complex, right? Brave isn't just understanding fear, it's also understanding difficulty. It's also being able to overcome challenges, danger, fear, difficulty. That's how we define it. And then being smart isn't just think about something before you do it. You say, all right, are there any perspectives that you need to have? What's the mentality that you've got going into this? Like there's a lot of other more deeper definitions that we've got for it. And then to be kind isn't always just nice, be nice people. Sometimes it's take the time to listen to someone. Sometimes it's respect yourself. Sometimes it's respect others, even though you disagree with them. There's all these different nuances to defining it. And that part of it's really important because as we get older, we all have different definitions, right? So for my courage is, continue to show up even when it's hard. That might not be someone else's. Else's might be faith. Someone else's might be resilience. Someone else's might be insert any word that you use to overcome challenges. That could be yours. So in this definition, it was very important that we started there. The next thing is to display it, and I kind of put it everywhere. So I got the chalk paint from IKEA, as you can see behind me, and I put it up all over the house, even to the point that my wife went back and like painted over some of it because I think I put it up too much. But if you ever heard that someone needs to see a message 7 times before they actually understand it or that they listen to it, it's the same thing. We need those reminders. And here's the thing is, at the time my daughters were 4 and 2, they they couldn't read, not what we were writing. But what happened was that my wife and I would have the reminders. So I would put different quotes up on the wall about parenting. I would talk about, being able to keep your chin up, your brain on, your heart open. It wasn't just writing brave, smart, kind. It was all these messages that we needed to see repeatedly in the day to make sure that we were living up to those values. And so put it up all over the place. Got the hashtag, and then I got the logo made up, as you can see behind me. And we started putting it on shirts and sweatshirts. And my my daughter started saying, "Ooh, Daddy, I really want to wear my Brave Smart Kind sweatshirt today," and it just kind of became a thing for our family. Again, at that time, it was just good fun for us. I had started writing the journal for Alexandra, and then started writing a journal for Emmeline as well, and still had no intention or even thought that this might be a book that might help other people parent as well. It was just our family values that we were using. So that brought us to the last point, is the ability to discuss it, because discussing it is really, that's where the rubber hits the road. This is the whole purpose of all these things, is to say, okay, well, can we have the relevant necessary discussions when we need to? So what happened was, when my daughters were younger, uh, I would go pick them up from school every day, and what's the question we as parents always ask? It's like, all right, well, how are you doing today? How is your day? And that amazing answer that we get back is fine. Our day was fine. And you want to hear all about it, but they don't tell you all about it. So I said, all right, well, I'm going to switch my questions up. So Alex, Sandra, and Emily got in the car one day. And I said, sweetheart, tell me who you were kind to today. And they said, fine. Wait, what? I said, tell me who you were kind to today. And they said, oh, well, Angela fell on the playground and I helped her up. That was kind. I was like, that was kind. Fantastic, sweetheart. And then Emmeline would say, well, somebody took a ball from me and I went and I took it back. I said, oh, that's very brave of you, sweetheart. And she's like, yeah, I know. So I got them in this process of telling me stories about what they noticed was brave, smart, and kind. And sometimes it wasn't their own stories. Say, well, was there anybody else kind to you today? And they would talk about that too. So we just started to create this culture of noticing to other people or in their days. And in that, the stories, they started to compete with their stories. They're like, no, no, I want to tell about my day first. I want to talk about my day. And it was great because then I would tell them things that were brave, smart, kind for my day. And then it turned into a table conversation. So we do something called Lion Light Bulb Love that comes from the logo. And at the dinner, we just sit, and it's not every night, it's just sometimes we go around the table and say, all right, well, what was something that was difficult today? That's your lion. What was a thought that you had? It's your light bulb. And then tell us something, again, the kind question of who are you kind to, or what did you see that was kind today? And that's the love one. Where did love show up? So it continues to reinforce these values with our kids without us telling us, be brave, be smart, be kind, because if you start saying be brave, be smart, be kind, then what happens is they start noticing when they're not. It's a double-edged sword. Um, as for instance, one day Emmeline came up and she had her head down when she got in the car, and I was like, "What's wrong, sweetheart?" And she said, "Daddy, I was not brave today." It's like, "Why? What happened?" She said, "Well, the kids told me to go up to the top of the slide and jump off, and I didn't do it. I was too scared." I was like, "Oh, my love." I was like, okay, well, tell me this. Why didn't you jump off the slide? And she looked at me like I was kind of stupid. She was like, duh, I would get hurt. And I said, aha, so you thought about it and you made the right choice to protect yourself. So that was smart and kind to you, wasn't it? And she's like, it was, Daddy. And I said, also, it's very brave to say no to your friends when they're all telling you to do something. So you were actually brave, smart, and kind today. And her face just lit up and she's like, oh, wow. So those discussions are very important because here's what I want more than anything for my daughters as they get older is I want them to be able to talk about these things with me. So right now, what they're talking about is, about helping a friend up who fell or taking a ball back or not jumping off a slide. And what happens when brave is going up to your boss and saying, I know that the men in this company are making more money than I am. And I don't think that that's a very acceptable thing. That's going to take courage. And what happens when my daughters have a very difficult choice to make in life? And they have to think it through. They have to go through their list of pros and cons, and they have to get different perspectives. And they have to understand that that's something that happens in real life. And what happens when they say, when heaven forbid they're in an abusive relationship and they're scared to leave someone because they think that that's not showing loyalty, that's something that's unkind, and they've shown kindness to themselves. Those are going to be the relevant conversations, and even as they've started to get older, they become much heavier conversations. But what we've done is we've created the language around these values in raising them with these values, so they've got the words to express it. And also, they've got the understanding that, hey, we talk about these things all the time. Maybe I can talk to my dad about that stuff. So, from my side of it, that's this is the important part. Can I have the relevant conversations with my kids when they need me to have them? Do they have the language? Do I understand it in the right ways? Can I ask the right questions? So, from that side of it, that's when the Brave Smart Kind for me really started to take root. But there's other things that I want us to understand about values. And once I started talking about brave, smart, kind, it started showing up everywhere else. So in our discussions, we were watching the classic movie channel, and this movie came up, Wizard of Oz, and I was looking, I was like, these are the three characters that Dorothy meets along the road, and each of them has one characteristic. The Cowardly Lion wants to be brave. Scarecrow wants to have a brain. He wants to be smart. And the Tin Man wants to have a heart. He wants to be kind. I was like, well, that was coincidental, was it? So then we started paying more attention. I'm going to guess that during an author's talk, everyone knows these characters, have read the books. In this epic series of books, Harry was always the one who had to find his courage. He was always the one who had to overcome some sort of challenge and find that bravery. Hermione, who, as we all know, everyone would be dead in that book if it wasn't for her. She was the hero of the book. And she was the insufferable know-it-all to start, wasn't she? Like, she was super book smart, didn't have a lot of the people skills, but her mind was always her strongest suit. And then Ron, I for a longest time I thought he was kind of the useless character, but especially in the end of the series, like he was the one. He was Harry's family. He was the one who was always loyal. He was always the one who had his back. So Brave Smart kind of showed up there. I was like, all right. Alexandra noticed this one. This is in Toy Story 3, I think. And Woody's being given away. And when Andy's describing, he says, "Now Woody, he's been my pal for as long as I can remember. He's brave like a cowboy should be, and he's kind and smart." And Alex was like, "Daddy, he just said brave, smart, and kind, just like we said." And I was like, "Wow, Alex, that's true. He did." And then I thought, you know what? These are popping up everywhere in all these different movies. The characters are always the ones who show courage, the ones who can think, and the ones who show some sort of heart. And I was like, all right, but this is just a coincidence. Brave, smart, and kind isn't that deep. Like, it's, again, I thought of it in 5 minutes. These are just coincidences, and it's Disney's way of telling stories, right? This is all over the place. And then I started looking a little bit further into it. This is Confucius. So we're if there's any historians on, don't correct my dates. I think we're at that point 500 BC. And he said wisdom, compassion, and courage are the universally recognized moral qualities of men. Wisdom, compassion, and courage. That was 2,500 years ago. And then you've got Plato in Greece. And these are the four virtues of Stoicism. It's wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. Wisdom, justice, or at that time, it's just being fair. It's how are we able to be fair to people? That was justice. Courage and temperance was just don't take any one of those values too far. And if you know your Greek philosophy, that also spills into religion. Plato, Greek philosophers, had a huge impact on Christianity and on Islam, and they would call Plato the first teacher. It was that present. So if you look at like the tenets of Catholicism, it's the same. It's wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. So in that, they've got slightly different words for it, but it's all of this stuff. So what I realized wasn't that I just came up with brave, smart, and kind, and it worked so easily. I think these are just what we're wired as humans. Like, we look at the world through a lens of brave, smart, and kind, and all of the stories, whether it's from antiquity or things that are made up, or it's from the Bible or whatever it is, that those stories, we hear them all the time. So what's fantastic is if we know that brave, smart, and kind are rooted inside of us, well, then we actually get to understand values and decision making much better. Then we get to start coming up with rules about it. Then we get to start to notice it in so many other places, because when we're talking to kids and creating that culture of noticing, well, then what happens is that we have a lot of helpers along the way. It's not just these are just my family values. No, these are things that are recognized in the world, despite culture, despite languages, despite where you're from. We can see it everywhere, and we can start to talk about it and have those relevant discussions about why people do what they do. So if you start to look at all these values that we had before, you start to see they actually come in these three branches: how you overcome challenges, how you critically think, how you treat yourself and others. All of those are organized without me doing it. This is always, it's just something that I observed in a very different way. And now when I talk to people, it's like, all right, well, I want to find out how they overcome challenges or how they critically think or how they treat others and themselves. And that tells me a world about them. And with my daughters, if we can continue to talk about all these three things, well, then they're going to have a leg up understanding why they do what they do. And in our family, these are the expectations. It's not to say that my kids are brave, smart, and kind. It's that I hope that they get to it someday and that they can understand the ways to overcome challenges, critically think, and treat themselves and others, so that when they need to call on their courage, they're able to. Or when they need to have a different perspective, they're able to have it. When they need to go into a situation where they need to treat somebody in a certain way, they understand that. So we've got all these values, and these are sheets that I use, which there's a link in the book too, that you can actually go and get all these sheets. So these are all the different values that are about overcoming, right? Some people do it with discipline or conviction or discovery or humility or originality, passion. These are all ways that people overcome challenges. Some of these values are inside of you. And these ones are all the ones that are about smart. Yes, curiosity, focus, finding nature, finding order in things, organization, having different perspective, um, the ability to visualize things. These are all different values that are smart. And then these ones are all that have to do with some sort of kindness of how we treat others and ourselves. Now, when I would go out to all these different places around the world doing these leadership things, I used to have them just pick values off this and say, wow, which ones do you identify with? But now we're able to categorize those a little bit better and help people define these very specifically. Say, find your top three. We all have hundreds of values inside of us, but I'm like, find your top three, and then we can start to do this. Well, when working with kids, we do the same thing, but it's a little bit more age appropriate. So for my 7-year-old, we don't give her the full list of things, right? We have fewer words to describe this. And then as they get older, we start to have conversations about these words. And because it's English, they're still their third language. I'm like, all right, well, do you know what commitment means? And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And I say, do you know what hospitality means? So we get to talk about all these. And because we've got the list, we can talk about the different words and what they mean to them. And they start to have, again, a bigger vocabulary around their values. So when they come to that path in the road, they're going to be able to make the right choice. Again, not always. We're talking about kids. I'm hoping that they get there and they start to make the right choice more and more often based off of what they believe, not just all the external stimuli that's going around them. So obviously, I raise my kids to be raised, smart, and kind, and they're perfect, right? Of course they're not. Here's something else that I realized about values was, here's a riddle for anyone if you want to put it into the chat if you've got an answer. I would say, which way does a tree fall? And then you're thinking that through. Which way does a tree fall? If your answer is down, you're right. And when it falls down, there's actually a riddle from Dr. Seuss from the Lorax. A tree falls whichever way it leans. A tree falls whichever way it leans. Whichever, I don't care where you would cut that tree that's in the photo, it's going to fall that way because it's leaning that way. It'll find its weakest point and fall. So do humans. So do we. Humans fall whichever way we lean also, which means it's not like if our values are the ways that we lean, like just within us, we say, all right, I lean that way. So if somebody is terribly honest, they can also be rude. If you take that value taken too far, that becomes your negative value. So our values lead us, and sometimes they lead us right off a cliff. So honest can be rude, fun, you could be not taking something serious enough. If you're incredibly loyal to someone or something, then maybe they could do no wrong. You've got blinders on. Love can be unrealistic, adventurous can be reckless, humble, you can be not driven enough. If you're too driven, you can be greedy. And if you're intentional, you can be called manipulative. That's one of mine, by the way. My wife is like, stop manipulating me. I'm not manipulating you. I just know where we want to go and I'm trying to get us there. She's like, yeah, exactly. So why does this help me as a father is to help me talk to my girls. And when something goes wrong, I don't say, oh, or you weren't kind enough. I say, oh, where you were overthinking this one. Or right at that point, it's like, I see what you were trying to do there. And what we need to think right now is how can we be more kind in that situation? So it's not just the one value that they're failing at, it's how do these other values get taken too far, which helps us because then where I feel like we're always talking that people aren't enough. And I find that we see that in our kids too. It's like, if my kid was just a little bit more of this, I want my kid to be kinder. I want my kid to be braver. I want my kid to be smarter. I want my kid to be whatever. Well, in that culture of noticing, what happens when we start saying, wow, you are so kind? And what happens if you take kindness too far? All right. These brave, smart, kind can go the same way. If you take kindness too far, you can get walked over, right? Those are the people who can never say no. Do we have anybody like that on the call? I'm one of them sometimes. Like it's you just want to help people, and so you say yes all the time. And if you say yes all the time, that's not always a healthy thing for your sanity, for any of this. As Mercedes, like, yeah, that's me too. Like that's how I got on this phone call. I'm just joking, Mercedes. So it's to say, yes, you're being so kind, and what happens if you become too smart? Is there such thing as too smart? Sure. One is somebody can become an egotistical know-it-all. That happens. Another one, which is too smart, that has there's no shame in it, is we become overthinkers. There's something called analysis paralysis, where you think so much about something that you can't make the actual decision. You're like, I just need more information, more information, more information, that you end up not making the choice at all. Anybody who stays up late at night overthinking a problem or thinking that, it's like, okay, well, that part of it our brains can take over, and when it comes too far, it's that part's hard. And can you be too brave? Of course you can. When you're too brave, you can become reckless. You can become reckless with money. You can be reckless with your career. You can be reckless with people's hearts, right? You can be so brave that you're like, oh, I'm going to go do something, and not think about the consequences necessarily. So in this, I say to help my kids out, I'm like, all right, if we understand that it's not justice, the temperance value that was in Greek Stoicism, that comes into play here. Any one value taken too far becomes too much. And we need the other values to balance ourselves out. So when I talk about courage to my daughters, it's not just courage for courage's sake. I want that to be compassionate courage. I want them to think about others and how they're affecting people. And I want that to be purposeful, meaning I want them to have some sort of goal or some sort of intention with that courage to make sure that it doesn't go so far. When we talk about smart, I want that to be courageous, that smart to be courageous. Is to say, all right, what are the different perspectives I have, even if I disagree with them, right? What if there's been times when it's like, I don't want to learn so much about that because if I feel if I do learn too much about that, that then I'm going to be held responsible and accountable for what happens. Yes, you are. That's an important thing to realize. And I want that to be thoughtful in terms of, well, what perspectives do I need? Who am I thinking about right now? That goes so far in the world, is to start to understand others, but it doesn't come naturally. Sometimes we have to seek out that information. And in their kindness, I want that to be confident kindness, not where they're just saying yes because they want to people please. I want them to say, well, yes, I'm doing this because I want to help you. And I know my limits, right? I want to be able to do all of these things and still not get burned out. I want to do all these things and make sure I know who I'm helping and why I'm helping them. And it can just be for kindness sake. I'm okay with that. But I also want them to understand it so that they can make the right choices there as well. So it's taking all those to keep those together. I call that reciprocity of values, to make sure that you're doing it in balance. So as a parent, again, it just helps me recognize this in them so that when we're doing this, we're creating that culture of noticing and understanding our values to make the right choices out of them. I was doing this session and I saw this guy a year after doing this session. He's like, PJ, discovering BSK was like discovering gravity. You always follow its rules, but don't know about its power until something as simple as an apple falls on your head, changes your world, and helps you understand the universe. Not only is he great with quotes, but that's how BSK has helped me as a parent, is that once you put on that BSK lens and start to see the world through this and start to see human interaction through this scope, well, then it does shift everything. Because once you understand it, once you understand why you succeed, once you understand why you fail, well, then it's going to help us give kids the actual understanding through this so that they can make the right choices. I'm only going to go on for a little bit longer and then open it up to questions. If anyone has questions, think about them. You can turn on your mic or you can type them into the chat too, and I'm happy to discuss. But that for me is the basic framework. And then in that, I started talking about it on like Facebook Live and just some social media posts. And then I had a teacher call me up about 6 months after I did this Facebook Live session. And she said, "Oh, I'm doing Brave Smart Kind in my classroom too. It's working so well." And I was just like, "Wow, what a coincidence. I do Brave Smart Kind with my kids." She's like, "Yeah, I know. I got it. I got it from watching your video. Thank you." I was like, "Oh, even better." So she took the Brave Smart Kind framework and this understanding of values and she threw it into her classroom. And then she started using it. And then the teacher across the hall started using it. And then the teachers in the whole school started using it. And they made it a theme for their year. And so then I went to the schools and started talking about being brave, smart, and kind. And then they started doing story times. And then I would read books to them. And trust me, if you pick up a kid's book, it's the first place to start. They've all got brave, smart, and kind stories in them. But once we categorize it for our kids, once we say this was brave, this was smart, this was kind, they start to see it through that lens as well. So this was me going into one of the schools and talking about brave, smart, and kind. Kids love to share their stories. As if I didn't know that as a father anyway, but you put yourself into like a room of 100 kids and say, who wants to tell a story about being brave, smart, and kind? And a ton of hands go up. And that's what we can do too. We start to get them talking about brave, smart, and kind. These are some of our fantastic teachers who are putting brave, smart, and kind into their classrooms. So that one is the display, define, display, discuss. The next one is just to create that culture of noticing so that our kids start to define it too. And they start to understand that this is something that they can start to understand about themselves, ask questions about, share stories of. And once they start to get to that point where they struggle with some things, all of those struggles can be put back into a brave, smart, and kind conversation. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for now, but that that point where you don't know what to say, which happens to me all the time as a father. I go back and I start going through my own brave, smart, and kind lens. A friend called me up after there was even horrible to talk about. There was a school shooting, and she said, "I don't know how to talk to my kids about this." And I was like, "Well, just try going through the brave, smart, kind stuff first. You know, talk about the fears of something, talk about the difficulties, right? Then talk about the perspectives that we need to have, and then talk about who it affects and how it affects them." And you can find questions around that in any topic that becomes difficult to discuss. And one of the things with girls who have entered into puberty now for me is daddy needs to learn a lot more about what they're going through as young women and how to have those conversations with them. So we start talking about what's scary, we start talking about what's difficult, brave. We start talking about the information that we need to learn and where we can find that. That's smart. And we start talking about the human elements to it, and that's kind. It gives me a place to start my conversations. And because we've already built up a culture around noticing and we've built up the language, then that helps me as a dad relate to my daughters and to start to put it into play there. So from the book, I that was I think that was one of the chapters. I just went through the actual framework of it. And in the rest, what you would find in the book is stories. I'm not much of a just laid out flat. I like to talk about the stories and how they're relevant in my life and in the lives of others that we've worked with, um, and really dig deeper into the experiences that I'm having as a father and try to understand those. And most of it, because I've been going through it for 13 years now, a lot of it's my mistakes. And at the end of all the chapters are all some lessons. And there's worksheets that if you would want to help you go through and help you determine what you're brave, what you're smart, and what your kind are, and help you notice what your kids are too. Because that's what I found with my three daughters is yes, they were raised by the same humans, um, and at the same time, they bring such different personalities to the table, but each of them has their own way to overcome, their own way to think, and their own way in treating people. And the more that I can recognize that uniqueness in them, as soon as you pay attention to something, kids repeat it. What you call attention to, kids repeat. And what you notice gets repeated. So if what we're doing is we're noticing all the things that our kids don't do, all the things that we want them to improve on, that part of parenting where it's just finding fault. I do it too. Uh, well, they're going to start to notice that too. So what if we do is notice all the good things that are inside of them? They repeat those things also. So, and from my side, the more that I can create that culture of noticing the positive habits of my kids in those three aspects, the more they repeat it, the more they talk about it, the more they share it with their friends, the more we get to have those brave, smart, and kind relationships together. So, I think I've spoken for a while now. We've got 12 minutes left. If you're still there, and if there are questions, then I'd be happy to. Let's help out. Oh yeah, sorry. I need to define parent better as you say that, Mercedes, is yes, I put parent, but even in the book, it's how we show up in the lives of kids. So yes, siblings, yes, nieces, yes, nephews, yes, for grandparents. And here's the thing is if what we can do is, and what they found in the schools that are putting Grace Smart and Kind into play too, is if we can create this culture where it kind of takes a village, right? It's not just the parents. If we can create a culture where parents are noticing, schools are noticing, coaches are noticing, community leaders are noticing, well, then, like I said before, values start at a young age, but they don't just come from your parents, right? Parents are, I am a fraction of who my kids are going to be. And maybe the biggest part of that fraction, and yet still, they're going to get their values from other people too. Great, as they should. It helps. We've all been defined by our experiences in life. So I love that, Mercedes. So yes, with your siblings too. So yeah, the book is Amazon's the best place to do it. They do print on demand, so you can order it and it'll still be. They, isn't that amazing? Like, did you know that about books? I just learned it when I became an author. Was that there's not a huge warehouse full of books that Amazon stores. They have these machines that you put in the order, and it just like flips out all of these pages in a mere matter of seconds, binds it, puts it in an envelope, and ships it off to you. So yes, Amazon is the best place. And there's other things too. Like if you go to the website, one of the what we do is we do training and education. So um, what pays the bills in my business is we go into different businesses because again, like I said before, this is something I'm teaching my kids, but I've learned it from leadership. Is we go into businesses and organizations and um, talk with community leaders too. Is to say, all right, well, let's recognize courage, critical thought, and kindness in leadership. Let's see where those are failing and how we can create the actions and habits around succeeding. So um, if there's ever a school that wants it too, I was like, all right, great, let's find a business sponsor. I'll go talk to the business. We'll come do the school for free, and we'll talk through those things. So in that, I've got trainings that we do for kids. We got trainings that we do for adults. We just started working with some soccer clubs as well, because you've got the coaches, you've got the organization, and then they're teaching our kids. What are they teaching them? Just soccer? No, they're teaching them to overcome challenges. Teaching them to think. They're teaching them to work in a team. If we can put those core values into other places too, well, then that's just going to help create that community a little bit more. So on Brave Smart Kind, you can find, bravesmartkind.com. You can find all of that information as well.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really great. If anybody else has any more questions or comments, you can feel free to put it in the chat. But I also just want to say, whenever we have author presenters, we always purchase the book. So we'll have it in the library. If any of you would like to check it out, then it'll be available for you. So,
Thank you, Mercedes. And
of
in that
course.
book, maybe even put a tag in there. There's links to get some of the resources online too. If you want to, you can get a worksheet that goes through all this stuff as well, that you can actually sit down and do with a partner, or just do with your kids too.
Great. Okay, if no one else has anything else to say, I do have a comment here and it says direct message, so I don't know if it shows up in the group chat, but it says my girls are 24, 21, and 17. I'm a licensed child care provider in my home for 6 littles. This book will be a great tool. So,
Thank you,
yes.
and thank you for actually doing that. That takes courage too. And let me know how it goes with the teenagers. And Mama D, I think you had 3 daughters too. I'm still in process. Like, we're just hitting teenage years. I think I need another book. That's like how to raise teens to be very smart and kind. But give me 10 years, that'll come out too.
Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. I hope you have a good rest of your evening, and I will have this up on our YouTube channel by the end of the day tomorrow. So please share it
Thank
with people.
thank you, Mercedes. Thanks everyone for showing up.
Yep. Thank you,
Appreciate it.
PJ.
Bye bye.